Afternoon, everyone. I will call this special meeting of council for Fundy Albert for September 25th, 2024 to order. The agenda for this special meeting of council for September 25th was circulated in advance. We'll accept a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. So moved by Deputy Mayor Arrow, seconded by Councillor Coates. Any discussion on the motion? Not, all in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Councillor Russell indicates aye, so the motion's adopted unanimously. Any conflicts of interest to declare in relation to the items on the agenda this afternoon? There being none, move on to item number 4, which is the motion related to the Provincial Municipal Highway Partnership Plan. So the Provincial Municipal Highway Partnership Plan, 5-year plan from 2027 to 2031, requires council's approval by resolution in order to be forwarded to the province by the deadline of September 27th, 2024. The plan content was provided to all members of council, so I would require a motion to adopt that plan as presented.
Be it resolved that the municipality of Fundy Albert approves the 2027 to 2031 Provincial Municipal Highway Partnership Program as presented.
So moved by Councillor Elderkin. Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Coates. Any discussion on the motion? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Do we need to specify exactly what we're submitting, like by our letter dated or anything like that, or just it's assumed, or?
There is we'll be taking this report from Englobe and putting it into the format that the PMHP requires. It'll probably just be a letterhead, and please see the attached from our engineers.
Which would be the table?
Yeah. Okay.
So it'll be definitely coming from Fundy Albert as a municipality and not from.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Any other questions? If not, everyone ready for the question? On the question, all in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Councillor Ward Russell, opposed if any, the motion's carried unanimously. Item number 5 is a motion related to the Canadian Railroad Historical Association. There is a proposed resolution to authorize the CAO to formalize the surrender of the land lease between the former village of Hillsborough and Department of Natural Resources and Energy Development for a parcel of land on which the replica train station sits. So if someone would be so kind as to read that motion, Deputy Mayor Arrow.
I'll read that. Whereas the Council of the Municipality of Fundy Albert adopted a resolution on August 1st, 2023 to transfer ownership of the replica train station building located at 2847 Main Street, Hillsborough, New Brunswick, to the New Brunswick Division of the Canadian Railroad Historical Association. And whereas the resolution adopted on August 1st, 2023 did not address the lease of the land on which the replica train station is situated, and whereas the municipality of Fundy Albert no longer has an interest in a land lease number 415-08-0055 entered into between Her Majesty the Queen in Right of the province of New Brunswick, as represented by the Minister of Natural Resources and Energy, and the village of Hillsborough on July 21st, 2003, be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of Fundy Albert direct the Chief Administrative Officer / Clerk to prepare and execute all necessary documents to surrender all interests by the village of Fundy Albert or village of Hillsborough in lands identified in lease number 415-08-0055.
So moved by Deputy Mayor Arrow. Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Jonah. Any discussion on the motion? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, so I'd just like to be very clear that I made one very small adjustment from the resolution that we had seen in our package, that the lease number had been quoted as two separate numbers. There was a zero missing in the second one. And that the lease number is clearly 415-08-0055. And so that's what I specified in the motion. They're the same. I said it twice. And that really, I just want to be clear that also the train station address, 2847 Main Street, if that is incorrect, is that address or thereabouts to, I think we all know that the building that we're referring to, it's in Hillsborough, it's on Main Street. There's maybe some confusion whether this is a valid address, but we can identify it in the whereas as that.
Okay. So I would add, thank you for pointing out that the number on the lease, it was different. So thank you very much for that. As far as the address is concerned, that's the address that was taken from the social media page for for that. But
Right,
I
I'm aware of
understand
that.
it to be that physical address.
Yeah.
So, correct. Any other questions or discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion as presented, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, if any? The motion is adopted unanimously. Item number 6, which is a motion related to funding for the Golf Club Road. So a council report form and some additional information was circulated outlining the need to apply for provisional borrowing authority related to the Golf Club Road replacement was circulated to council. So I would need a motion introduced before we can have a conversation on it. Yes, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Land.
I'll read that motion. Whereas the reimbursement for the Golf Club Road culvert replacement is not guaranteed from NB EMO disaster recovery, disaster finance assistance for municipalities, municipal damage fund. Whereas Fundy Albert lacks the financial capacity to fund this project from existing budgets of reserves. Be it resolved that the municipality Fundy Albert submit to the Municipal Capital Borrowing Board an application for authorization to borrow for a capital expense for the following term and amount. Culvert replacement, $1,159,000. The term is 30 years. And also the culvert replacement interim finance, $1,159,000 for 3 years.
So it's moved by Councillor Land. Is there a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Elderkin. Any discussion on the motion? So I will add a few things to that before, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah,
Go. So I learned today that obviously there's been quite a bit of information flowing in, but I learned today that the process for a request for borrowing and interim financing authority is more complex than I first understood. I was informed that once a resolution is adopted, the request will be sent to the Municipal Capital Borrowing Board. There is then an approximately 1 month period where the municipality can be required to provide information to the board necessary to bring it to the board's meeting. In this case, that meeting would not occur before November 9th. This means that an approval might not be received before November 23rd. According to the treasurer, that could take as long as 2 weeks after the actual date of the Municipal Capital Borrowing Board meeting, which would then result in a ministerial order authorizing us to borrow funds. I would still recommend adopting this resolution, which can then be sent for approval. Now, I suspect there will be some questions around this, so I'd be more than happy to respond to some of the questions with the information that I'm aware of, and I believe our CAO and clerk would be able to answer some of the others. Deputy Mayor Arrow, you had some questions?
Yes, there's 2 items that were listed in the motion. One is the culvert replacement itself for the amount of roughly $1,159,000.
Correct.
And 30-year term. And the other one is the interim financing, same amount, 3-year term. Can you please explain just what's going on with the 2 different amounts?
So anytime we look for borrowing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and it was even the case when we purchased the fire truck, You ask for the borrowing authority, which is issued through a ministerial order, but you also ask for interim financing. In this case, the interim financing would serve for us to be able to fund the project, complete the project, and at the end of it, we'll know how much we have to borrow, if any, in this case, because I am still confident that at the end of the day, other than the non-refundable portion of the HST, we should be able to have all that covered through the disaster financial assistance program. So there's where the two numbers are.
The second question was, it seemed to me that I think it's in the Local Governance Act, there's actually limits on borrowing. I think there's percentages perhaps of the budget and such. Are these all within all of the legal limitations that are imposed
Yeah.
on?
Yes,
I mean,
the Trevor's informed us, I think our limit is, I want to say 100, I'm gonna get back to you on that one, but we are going to be okay to borrow that amount, yes.
Okay, and the last one is, well, maybe I got a couple more, that this is a resolution to approach the Capital Borrowing Board for an approval. This is not actually approving any expenditure at this present time, correct?
Correct. Other than the council had previously approved the engineering work to develop the design and also the tender process, but that had already been approved.
Right, understood.
This will not authorize any work.
Yeah, and linked to that, because it's not authorizing any work and the expenditure of any money, the questions about where exactly the money would come to pay for this is something that we don't need to talk about now, or
We don't need to, we can.
maybe
We
it would be worthwhile.
We can kind of have a conversation around it. So as I mentioned, the non-refundable portion of the HST, which in the council report form is estimated at around 48,000, that will have to be covered by the municipality. So, and so I had asked the CAO to be able to speak to that particular issue. And I have spoken with the engineer with NBMO, and the change from the engineer's estimate of approximately 675,000 to the low bid of 1.1 million, that has no bearing on any change in approach or any risk to the municipality. I'm told that our request for the project is eligible and meets all the requirements outlined in the disaster financial assistance program. And because of that, they're confident that it will be covered, that the cost will be covered in accordance with the guidelines, which I provided all of council with, which indicates, and my conversation with the engineer who manages that program on behalf of the province and is paid for by the federal government, that we should have all costs covered. The difference is that they cannot come out and say, we guarantee that we will cover it, because then they own the project. The project is owned by us, and we can apply to have the amounts reimbursed. I was informed by the province that there are a number of organizations, provincial government departments that have applied for project approval through the Disaster Financial Assistance Program, including the town of Sussex, and their biggest customer by far, the biggest client of the Disaster Financial Assistance Program, is the province of New Brunswick Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. So when I asked, is this one of the biggest projects? He said, oh no, it is not. So I have every confidence that this will be fully covered by, other than the non-refundable portion of the HST, because the government of Canada doesn't reimburse HST.
Right, and where would that be funded from? Do we know?
And so that would be it's a shared cost, so it would be funded through the budget under the shared cost.
That's
And I
what the
believe-
answer
That was the answer
from the treasurer.
Why would it be shared?
Well, at the end, what I understood is, last year, the beginning of this year, when there was a truck purchase, and it was stated that all moving forward, everything would then be considered under as a shared service.
So any work that gets done in the former villages for road work now becomes a shared service?
Is that not the way that the budget was working?
No, it
No.
was, previously with the purchase of the vehicles, it was specifically out of the various municipal reserves. In this case, it would be the Hillsborough Reserve. Having said that, we also need to be mindful that moving forward under the PMHP project, if that's the position that council wants to take, if there's work done on Route 114 within a municipality, then it would be that specific municipality that would have to bear the brunt of the PMHP work. I suggest that we can have a conversation about this prior to making a formal decision to authorize the project, so we know exactly how to treat this. Because if we say that, and I'll use the PMHP as an example, if there's 1.6 kilometers of work that is being authorized through PMHP in 2027, and the amount of $80,000, I think I'm just going from memory. If the amount for that PMHP is $80,000, it would be solely the residents of Riverside Alpha that would be responsible for that. So we could take that approach. We could take the approach that all taxpayers in the former three villages contribute to that, or we could find some other means of addressing it. But at the end of the day, we need to at some point become consistent in our approach in terms of how we pay for things.
I would agree. And I think moving forward, we need to have that conversation.
Correct.
This is a big project with no guarantee of funding.
Correct.
Technically, there is no guarantee of
Well,
funding.
the $48,000 would have to be covered by
Right.
Fundy Albert.
But this is your portion, so there's no guarantees. So at the end of the day, before it's awarded, we need to have a clear plan, what the backup plan is if the work gets done without the funding.
Right.
Even if they cover the 700,000 and some that we first submitted, right?
Yes.
So there's still a big chunk there that would not be covered.
Right, but as I mentioned, Counselor, I have spoken to the engineer and that the change in position was a misunderstanding on my part, has nothing to do with our eligibility for the project. With the grand scheme of things, has nothing to do with the difference between the 760 and the 1.1 million. So that's not why they're saying that they won't guarantee it.
No, I understand that. I totally understand that. But I think we still, before we go into it,
Right,
there must be a limit what a municipality can borrow for debentures.
Right.
Moving forward, right? So,
and that's what our CAO indicated, that it's well within our
Well,
ability.
but I can get your exact number.
but are they amalgamated together? Because we have other debentures. So is it accumulative till it gets to a certain level and then you can stop borrowing, which really leaves our hands tied? I'm not
Right.
saying this work doesn't need to be done. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Mhm.
I'm just saying we need to have a solid plan
Right.
before we proceed with a backup plan of
Right.
where the funding's coming from.
And so the motion, my recommendation to council is to approve this motion for the simple reason is that it will authorize us to make a request for borrowing. It does not mean that we will authorize the project. It just means that it's almost like applying for pre-approval, a pre-approved mortgage, but maybe not necessarily buying a house.
Right. I
That's how I would.
totally understand that. I'm just saying before we award the contract, I think
Yep.
there's further conversations we need to have, not wait till it gets to that point.
Correct. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yes,
So
that.
so I will support this motion, but my only other comment is it's a little bit alarming to me, but we can defer this to another meeting, that the treasurer is viewing this as an expenditure under the banner of shared because it's somehow similar to the truck purchase.
No, it's different.
Which is totally different, right? So that, to be clear, the truck purchase was shared among the three former municipalities. Was it not?
I believe
One of them,
one of the was
first,
essentially purchased at the Hills for the first one,
right.
The first. And it is fundamentally different than the Golf Club Road, which is not this is,
artery.
and it's in clearly within one municipality that so far we've been raising those roadwork funds from the local subunits up until now. Well, this was the big stink about really the Pound Hill repair. That there was so much money that was required that was not within the Hillsborough coffers, that it was necessary to pull the money from Alma and Riverside Albert subunits that had been raised by their taxpayers for road work.
You're correct.
Right, so that kind of road work was never shared up until now. So why the treasurer might have suggested that this would be by definition shared is a bit alarming to me.
I would suggest we have that conversation
Another time.
in a committee of the whole meeting.
Yeah.
So we can have a
Yeah.
full thorough discussion.
I agree.
Maybe get some,
It is a conversation all around subunits. Is
Right.
it? It's
well, it could be,
part of our budgeting.
there's the shared within all of Fundy Albert, which this is not. It shouldn't be. And then there's the shared possibility between the three former incorporated municipalities, or is this strictly a Hills taxpayer issue? Right? So that's where we need to have the discussion to sort this out. And it's in the broader context of it goes from the $48,000, which is the non-refundable portion of the HST, to whether we have to borrow money to finish the project. We could have a debate on the merits of actually doing or not doing the project. I think that's important to have, but for tonight, the purpose is whether or not we're authorizing the request for that, because one can't happen without the other. And we need to get that in place.
But in the future, we're discussing it tonight about just making it so we can borrow the money, which is fine. But in the future, as John brought up, we have to decide whether Route 114 is going to be a shared cost for everybody, or the side streets are going to be shared by the municipalities themselves. That's what the conversation
That is basically, I think, is what Deputy Mayor was saying.
That's what I want to clarify.
And in this case, if we're considering that this golf club road is a bypass, if the 114 is closed down, then that becomes something for everybody and not just for Hillsborough. It's got different layers and it's not.
There's arguments that could be made in one or the other, but we could have that conversation.
Yeah, again, that goes back to a debate, because if Route 114 was there, that means water streets are shared service. And I'm pretty sure nobody wants to help pay that one.
Any other discussion? Councilor Coates?
So it doesn't look like that's gonna happen this year.
Not 100% sure yet. There's some conversations, like I just learned this afternoon. So there's some conversations that are currently occurring and others that will occur. What we need to find out while we submit this application is what implications are there for the project to proceed, both in terms of permits and in terms of whether it's practical or even feasible for work to be done in the latter stages of the year, or would we have to wait until next year?
Because the Wawa permit's only till November.
The end of October, they were willing to put it into November, but then we would have to get Englobe to verify with Fisheries and Oceans to see if it can, there's a whole series of conversations that we need to have. So, but it would still be prudent for us to get the borrowing authority in place so that we have everything ready if we decide to proceed. And that's if we decide to proceed. Any other questions? If not, on the motion for the borrowing authority, all in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, if any? There's none opposed. The motion's carried unanimously. So there, item number 7 is a motion related to the land disposition on Water Street in Riverside, Albert. Right. There's a proposed resolution in relation to a previous motion of council to extend a date by which certain actions need to occur on behalf of the party mentioned in the previous motion. So this would fall under a motion to amend something previously adopted. If prior notice is not given, which in this case it has not been, the motion to amend the motion previously adopted to change the date in the last paragraph from the December 31st, 2024 motion to December 31st, 2025 requires a 2/3 support. So what I would ask right now, and so I'll add that so I would say I need to know from council if there is 2/3 support to agree to amend that motion. Just identify by saying you're in favor or not. I'm assuming everyone is. Okay. So the motion would be,
I move to amend the motion previously adopted by council on February 6, 2024 to donate a parcel of land with PID number 017663382 in Riverside, Albert to Fundy Albert Housing to reflect that Fundy Albert Housing will have until December 31st, 2025 to begin development of housing on the parcel of land by removing the year 2024 and adding the year 2025.
so that's moved by Councillor Eldrington. Is there a seconder on that motion? So seconded by Councillor Coates. So any discussion on the motion? So it's specifically to change the date from 2024 to 2025. Yes, Councillor Lance.
There's a correction on your PID, the first, I move to amend. You got 2 3s in there. It's too long. You've got 9 numbers, there's only 8 in the PID. It's 017663382,
Correct.
but it's actually 6382. It's right on the bottom, but it's wrong on the top.
So you would move to amend that motion.
I would.
Okay. It's my big fingers, I guess, when I was preparing the draft resolutions. So is there a seconder on the motion to amend? All in favor of the motion to amend the PID to remove 13 from the number? Signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, if any? Oh, so that motion is adopted. So now we have the adopted motion, or the amended motion, which will now read, whereas Forestdale Home Inc. has a shortage of housing available for its personnel, and this is impacting their ability to provide nursing home care in the community. And whereas the Forestdale Home Inc. and the newly created Fundy Albert Housing is in need of land to construct affordable housing options in the community of Fundy Albert, and whereas it is in the interests of the Village of Fundy Albert to partner with Fundy Albert Housing in their endeavor to develop housing, be it resolved that the Village of Fundy Albert agrees to donate a parcel of land on Water Street, Riverside, Albert, with PID 017663382 to Fundy Albert Housing. Be it further resolved that Fundy Albert Housing will be responsible to ensure that the land can be developed for the stated purpose and will be responsible for all costs necessary to obtain title to the parcel of land with PID 017663382. Be it further resolved that Fundy Albert Housing will have until December 31st, 2025 to begin development of housing on the parcel of land. Failure to do so will result in Fundy Albert Housing agreeing to return the parcel of land back to the Village of Fundy Albert. So that is the amended motion. Are there any questions on that motion? If not, all in favor of the amended motion signify by stating aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, if any? The motion is adopted unanimously. Back to my notes. I believe that is all we had this evening, so I would accept.
Just procedurally, did we get that one all right? So we amended the amended motion. I know we're all getting better at this.
Yeah.
Did we need to first, make a decision about the amendment, which is the ditching of the 1-3, and that passes? Did we do that?
Yeah, so
Yes.
it's moved to amend by Councillor Land and seconded by Councillor Jonah.
And we voted on that?
And voted all in favor, and then the amended motion was read and it was carried unanimously.
Okay, very good then. So
Okay,
that's all good then.
all right,
I'd like to ask one other question.
sure,
if you allow.
go ahead.
And it's back to it's a procedural question here
Mhm.
that led you, Mayor Richon, to conclude that we needed 2/3 support because there appeared, at least in your view, that there had not been a notice of motion.
That's in Robert's rules. That's why I quoted Robert's rules,
But did we not have a notice of motion? A notice of motion, according to our bylaw, the procedure rules bylaw. Notice of motion is for some motion that's not on the agenda. Yet this motion was on the agenda, and actually the draft wording had been provided to council in advance of the meeting. And therefore, I believe that that was notice of this motion, in which case there was no requirement for anything more than a simple majority, which it's moot for us because we've adopted it unanimously. But I think procedurally, that's how I look at it. And I'm not needing an answer now because it's not affecting us, what we just did. But for future, I think this is important that we get this resolved. Because as I said, in my view, the notice was given because it was on the agenda. And in fact, we even had a draft motion in advance of this meeting.
And like I said, I'm going by Robert's rules and our procedural bylaw that requires that a notice of motion needs to be given. And in this case, because it's something that had been previously adopted, it says that in order, if a notice of motion to do that had not been given, so I'm reading it strictly word by word. If a notice of motion had not been previously given, then it requires a 2/3 vote
Yeah,
of council.
I just believe we did get the notice though.
So what you're saying is by having it on the agenda,
Yes.
it constituted a notice of.
Yes,
I take your comment under advisement and I'll make sure, I'll take a look at
Yeah.
it
very good.
with Robert's rules with the clerk and then maybe provide some clarity at the next committee of the whole.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other business before we adjourn? If not, I'll motion to adjourn, please. So I'll move by Councillor Elderton. Thank you very much for attending and thank you all for your decisions. Thank you.